Give me the case, please. What's going on, guys? The subject of today's video is going to be the Hot Toys Iron Man 2 Mark V product code MMS 400-D18. The Mark V, or coined by many fans as the suitcase armor, is one of fans' favorite suits that Tony has graced the screen with. And though unfortunately it made a very short appearance in his first encounter against Whiplash, it would still stand out as being one of the most memorable suits in Tony's Hall of Armor. It first appeared, and only appeared, in the film release Iron Man 2, which came to theaters in May 2010. Before we look at one of my all-time favorite Iron Man suits, let's figure out how tall he is. From his feet to the top of his head, he is exactly 12.5 inches in height. For its display stand options, you get yourself a rectangular display base featuring the Iron Man 2 and Mark V across this metallic front placard. It does have an adjustable crotch clip, in other words, the finger is going to be standing on top of this. I have a bit of a concern when it comes to this base. From face value, it doesn't look like any other base or any different than other bases that we've received in the past. On the top, we've got a motorway asphalt, part of the scene in which Tony Stark is participating in his race and is unfortunately gets his first encounter against Whiplash. My big concern is not so much the fact that you can't really make out what exactly this is. It's obviously a small chunk of the roadway in which Tony first battles Whiplash. My biggest concern actually is the size of the stand. Now, looking at it, you would imagine that that's an appropriate size stand for accommodating a figure, but then it's until you start displaying the figure on top that you start immediately seeing the limitations in which a stand this big can give you. We take the figure and we're going to put it on top, and first and foremost you will see that it doesn't give you a big footprint, but there still gives you really a foot space on either side. That of course is mileage as to how wide you're going to spread the figure, but the figure is metal, so it really needs as much footing as it possibly can. And I feel almost as if the display stand is not nearly big enough, that is, to accommodate a figure like this. Maybe if they had simply widened the stand just a little bit on either side, at the very least it would give you enough clearance that the feet could have a little bit of extra wiggle room. I also happen to think that the crotch clip, which would normally be fine for any other 6-scale figure, is not nearly suitable enough for holding Iron Man. In fact, putting him back onto the stand The clip itself, a lot of times I had the figure kind of leaning forward because it just doesn't seem to catch enough of the armor. You can see it just barely graces the lower torso of Iron Man, and ultimately the figure either topples over, or a lot of times it'll pull the neck out from the plug in which the neck is plugged into place. I don't know the workaround towards that. Maybe they could have either given one of the straight curved plastic pieces that we've seen with some previous releases before, or they could have done something different. I'm not really sure what it is. It stands well if you have the feet very close together, but I feel it's not nearly stable enough to keep this guy in place. If you have any bit of weight leaning forward, the figure is really prone to toppling over, and this clip, which may seem sufficient enough, I feel really isn't enough to keep the figure in place. You can see he really does lean forward. There's not nearly enough holding on to him. Mind you, you could easily just go without the stand as well, and the figure has no problem whatsoever of standing. Getting him in any sort of other dynamic poses, they even indicate in the instructions not to replace the neck with the one that's there, simply because if you have him in any other flight pose or anything off the footing of the stand, that stand's going to topple over. There's just not enough footprint of the stand, which is kind of going back to what I was saying about the stand. If only it was just a little bit wider, maybe a little longer, a little wider. It doesn't have to be at a considerable size, not something like we've seen with the Man of Steel Hot Toys figures, for example, that had the full Superman shape. But at the very least, it could be just a little deeper, I suppose, and certainly a little bit wider, just to give you a sufficient enough space to kind of clear the figure here. This upgraded version of the Mark V, one of my all-time favorite suits, is now presented here in metal. And of course, with metal comes to the fact that it's a much heavier figure in comparison. At the initial stages of getting the Mark V released, it was in plastic. I had good intentions of picking that figure up, and then ultimately just kind of fell at wayside. I didn't end up getting it. I'm kind of glad I did. At the very least, I'm glad I didn't get it, because now a metal version is definitely the way to go. Certain figures, I think, validate having them in metal releases versus plastic. Iron Man's, or really anything that's metal in nature, if the characters such as like RoboCop, or Iron Man, or Terminators, anything that's really metal, I think warrants having a metal release, just so that when you pick it up, it feels like it's got a weight to it. I think that's really the way to go. There are batteries that have to be installed, light-up options in the head, the torso, and the forearms. I'll show you where those put into place right now. Why don't we go ahead and start with the head. We'll pop the head off. It comes with the neck, so don't be alarmed. This is also kind of a good opportunity to get a close-up look at the head. A real traditional-looking Iron Man armor head, except for, of course, the inclusions of these additional panel lines that cut through the eyes and all the way up the front plate. If not for that, it does have a very similar design to, say, perhaps the, I guess, Mark III or Mark IV. To that matter, I guess the Mark VI as well, which is a very consistent trend for a lot of the Iron Man armors. Again, I like that additional panel lining. It just kind of makes it look unique and different to itself. And of course, above and beyond the fact that it has the panel linings, one of the big differences is it's silver. Up to this point, other than really having the all-silver armor, we've been treated mostly to a cranberry red outfit, or red suit, with a lot of gold accents. Here, the gold accents are completely dismissed, and instead we get ourselves silver, which works quite well. And that silver stays consistent, basically, from all the way down to the bottom of the figure here. Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. The battery compartment is fairly easy to access. It's just simply a case of sliding it back. It does feel, and there is the magnet right there, but it does feel like when you put the slot of the head back in, the magnet catches it right away. There you go. We just pop that off. It does take batteries. In fact, it takes LR621 times 3, so you'll need 3 of them. And luckily, both the head, the torso, and the arms come with the supplied batteries. It's not to say it's an easy task putting in the batteries. I always dread those moments when I have to put in Iron Man batteries because you have to put so many of them in. And they do give you tweezers. But let me just say, though, the tweezers at times can even be more of a difficulty than just using your fingers. I wish they would go the route eventually of giving us metal tweezers. Plastic, I find, just slides the battery off. If you try gripping a battery with plastic tweezers, a lot of times, bing, you'll shoot the battery across the room. And as a result, that's why it took me about 35 minutes to put the batteries in. I kid you not. Anyways, now that the batteries are in place, you have your on and off switch, a screw, of course, compartment up the top there to access those batteries. You get a very bright, translucent, very bright, luminescent white eye here. The outer area, though, kind of has a slight frosted nature to it. I want to dare say it projects a little bit of a blue tint to it, but mostly it is white. It is very soft, but equally so, it's very bright as well. Accessing his arc reactor light, we're going to spin the figure around, and there's this shape, which I can only describe best as saying it kind of looks like a sword. Kind of get your finger underneath there, and it pops fairly easy off, despite for the fact it's got pegs on the underside there. And there is your on and off switch. Once again, battery compartment, which has the same size batteries. You get actually two types of batteries. The LR621s also go into the head there as well. And let me just say this as well. You only get enough to fit the 3 in the torso, the 3 in the head. Maybe they may eventually give us more batteries. I think they should give us at least 2 more batteries in case you lose one of them. You do have the option of having the extras to work with, but no, you get exactly the same quantity as what you would need for the torso and the head. Once that's switched on, much like the eyes, you get a very bright, soft, however, LED light, and it does project quite nicely. Very bright also, I might add. The hardest things always seem to be the arms to change out the batteries. You're just going to move the arm out of the way, and you need to pull the bottom panel off. And in there is your battery compartment. And I'm always uncertain the size of this battery is L521F, L521F batteries times 3. You do also get those included as well. Go ahead and switch on the little on and off switch there, and you may not see it right away until you go ahead and take the fist off, and you'll see also there's your bright light projected through. We can go ahead and do the same on the other side. General practice for me, at least, is when I do review the Hot Toys Iron Mans, I put the batteries in for obvious reasons so that you can see everything light up, but when I am putting them on display, I seldom keep batteries in. I always worry about leaking batteries, and some have assured me that that's not the case, but I've also heard horror stories, so a lot of times I do take the batteries out when I have them on display. It will only need me to go in and take off the panels, turn on the lights, and put it back in the cabinet to admire the lights before going back, turning off the lights, and putting all the panels back in place. It's just not unnecessary time. So a lot of times I just leave the batteries out for, again, the risk. I don't want the batteries to leak, corrode inside, and damage the mechanics of the Mark V, or really any Iron Man suits. Concerns about batteries leaking aside, I really love this suit. I've always loved this suit. It's one of my all-time favorite designs for Iron Man. It has what I could describe as a coil nature to it. It almost looks snake-like, the way that everything has kind of coiled itself together and now separated and expanded around his armor, or expanded around his body. It comes, of course, from a suitcase, and it's neat the way that they work it. Generally, I don't like in movies where they have just armor that appears out of nowhere. At the very least, the briefcase does make some sense, as the way even in the movie as he transforms into the Mark V, it does seem like all those components could theoretically wrap themselves and expand themselves around Tony's armor, or around Tony's body. So like all the aspects of the armor, you'll see a consistent trend where it looks just like coils. There's all these little connecting points in which the coils would have expanded out and overlapped one another, giving him a full armor protection. Even like up at the top here too, you've got that expansion of the gorgeous silver coils, which run its way all the way down. Again, consistent, and across the board, you'll see a lot of these little strip armors as opposed to full-sized plates. One thing that does carry over, though, despite for the fact it's got all the silver added to it, is the color of the red. The same kind of cranberry red that we've seen in previous armors and seen in armors since are also making their appearance here. But it's all this additional silver that really sells it for me, and one of the particular reasons why this one stands out to me as one of my all-time favorites. If you look very closely, you can make out all these little scratches, even like actually up at the head area here. There's these worn away areas of the metal around the ears, around the shoulders especially, scratched away areas of paint as he's battled against Whiplash. And you want to talk about intricacies, you can see all these little moving flaps here, none of which do actually move on this armor at least, but you can see how all of these would have had independent hinges to them. We move the arm just slightly out of the way here. He's even got some inner components here from the shoulders. All these mechanical little gears and moving components all come together to give you a fantastic looking armor. Now, depending on how you want to display the Mark V, you also get yourself an interchangeable head of Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark. This is one of my biggest concerns with the figure. I do appreciate the fact that they did give us an interchangeable head. I rather have to admit that the head sculpt is really good, but I don't think it looks like Tony Stark, at least from that scene. By the point that he's putting on the armor, he's already been tussling around with Whiplash and been thrown around, that he actually does have more draping bangs and rather wet, sweaty complexion to him. This is almost Tony Stark, as if you would see him walking down the hallway wearing a regular suit. No, not that suit here, but a regular, say, suit and tie. Other than for the little bit of cut on the side of his face, I would never be able to really pinpoint this as a specific head for the Mark V. To change the head, first we're going to go ahead and take the panel off here, because we don't want to have the lights working the whole time. Well, we've got the head off, of course. Slide that back into place. There we go. And then go ahead and pop the neck off the socket. Revisit the head now that you've got with Tony Stark, and just kind of wiggle that back onto the ball joint. There we go. Just to show you a little bit more what I'm talking about, here on the left side is the Hot Toys Iron Man with the interchangeable Tony Stark head. On the other side, here is the screenshot from Tony Stark in Iron Man 2 when he's about to fully turn into the Mark V. I think it's safe to say by that point, his hair wouldn't change any further than what it currently is just before the visor of the helmet flips down. You'll see that Iron Man Tony Stark here, Tony Stark is not only got his hair down, it's kind of more like bangs by this point. He still has the cut here, but his hair is so drastically different. I'm not really even sure why Hot Toys went this route. If they were going to go the full effect of giving us a metal version of the Mark V, then why almost give us just a casual Tony instead of the one here on the right? The one on the right also as well, if they had crafted the head sculpt here to make it look like that, it would also differentiate this Tony Stark head from basically every other Tony that we have gotten in the line. Despite it not really looking like Tony, at least from that scene, it's a really nice head sculpt. To complete the look of him in mid-transformation, what you can go ahead and do, a couple of little things, a couple of really cool things actually. You can go down to his feet, and you can flip out these panels. Each one of the panels, there's 4 on either side, and they are on 2 hinges. So you can bring those out. You can do the same on both sides, and then you'll do that times 4, because you're going to do it on both sides of the legs. But you'll just get your fingers in there. They're not as tricky as you would imagine them to be. And again, you just want to pull those all out, and then we'll do the same on this side. Once you get that done, you can get some extra details on the interior of the leg that you wouldn't have normally seen. Some spectacular looking sculpt on the inner mechanic workings there. And actually, while you're at it, you can go ahead to the back here and also flip these panels up too, just to kind of give you some added movement to, because imagining all these panels would be in motion as they are wrapping their way around Tony Stark's body. So you can go ahead and get that going. Completing the looks, you can bring up the shoulder pads here, and then these little flaps here will come out. This middle one doesn't stick out as far, so just keep that in mind. You don't want to pull it too far that it pops out. The ones on the end, of course, stick out a little bit further, like that. And then you can go ahead and bring these out as well. These have, these seem to have an ongoing problem where when I bring them out too far, they do pop out. They pop out actually quite frequently, so you may experience that as well when you have this for yourself. Just be mindful of that. And again, these little flaps, you can also bring those out, completing the look. Now this looks cool. This is probably going to be how I display the Mark V. The only disappointing end of it is I wish Tony Stark's head was a little bit more screen accurate to how it appeared in Iron Man 2. Despite that though, I still really think it turned out quite good. You can also go around to the back section here, and he has these additional flaps. I'm not 100% certain if these flaps would have been in motion during the time that you know, he was transforming into the Mark V, but you can also do that as well. And again, I really like the look. It's a shame, again, about the detailings being a little slightly off on the head. Otherwise, though, I love this look. This look, by the way, all came from this briefcase. Well, not specifically this briefcase, but it did in the movie. And it's nice that they include it with Iron Man here. I don't think at the time that they were initially playing around the idea that there was going to be a race car Tony. I don't think everyone got released. If it was, it fell under my radar. As of course, now that we've gotten this case in hand, and we've gotten ourselves a metal version of the Mark V, I'd love to also get a race Tony, a race car driving Tony, to actually hold this, you know, just prior to him turning into the Mark V. Some added bonus points could have been awarded to Hot Toys if there were actually moving components to it. Try as I might, there's actually nothing that's moving, and anything you can lift or flaps or anything like that you can actually do to it. I really wish there was. I mean, beggars can't be choosers, but at the very least, if the case had opened up and you could have had something moving inside, little panels that you could have flipped out. But you get a sort of bare bones release instead. Taking nothing away from the case itself, the case has some glorious colors of that cranberry and the silver, and it does look good. You just can't really do anything with it. Mark V gets a bunch of damaged parts for its armor, but I think before we start doing that, we'll probably go ahead and revisit the head, because near the end of the movie, or at the end of that scene when he's fighting Whiplash, he doesn't have his head exposed. So we'll go ahead and replace back the Mark V armor's head. And let's go ahead and look at the damaged parts that also come with the figure. Why don't we start with the largest, and it is a swap out for this arm here. You get the full arm, right, with the shoulders and hands, but you'll see that there's some heavy damage happening to the armor here. Now additional scrapes, as well as peeled away armor. Here it's much more frayed, and you can see almost the under metal mesh underneath the plates that have now been ripped away. Really like also that they've given him interchangeable hand, where it's got Tony's NASCAR or motocross suit underneath there. They do give you two variations of the hands if you want to have a closed fist or if you want to have an open hand, but I love the marred nature of the warped metal here. It really does look good if that is the look you're going for. To accomplish that, just want to hold on to the torso here and pop the arm. It's not something I like doing a whole lot of, but we're going to go ahead and pop the arm off the ball joint. And then we'll take the ball joint here. It's just going to sit into the socket like so. Make sure that's hinged down. There is the problem, of course, as you could imagine, if it's a ball joint and it's got a hinge to it, the hinge may bend in as you're popping that arm into place. Just give it the college go and keep trying your best. You'll get that back into place, and now you've got a much more damaged arm on the one side of the Mark V. As for the other side, they give you one shoulder plate with a big gash in the top there from Whiplash's whips. I'm not going to put it on for this particular figure. The reason why is I did do it at the beginning, and I want to just show you what's happening here. You've got a hinge, and then you've got a clear individual, a little plastic, kind of little square of plastic here, and then you've got a ball joint on the top. It is next to impossible, and I struggled doing this quite a bit. I took this shoulder off in the beginning of this review, and I replaced it with this one here. But the problem with it is there's a hinge here, and there's a hinge up here. So when you're ready to put the new shoulder pad on, you're either going to bend it frequently on this hinge, or 9 times out of 10, you're going to bend the hinge that's on the ball joint. I can't think of any other way they could have gone about doing this other than if this was a magnet and you simply could just attach it via the magnet instead of having to go through the rigorous motion of changing out the ball joint. The hinge is literally right where that ball joint is, so when you push it down, the ball joint will pop this way or it'll hinge this way. It never stays straight enough to get that shoulder in place, but the benefit of that is you have the hinge here and then you've got the ball joint happening there. What they really should have done is used magnets or something, but just want to show you. I won't put the shoulder pad on because I know I'm going to probably spend the next hour or so trying to replace it again. But just want to show you how that comes together here. What I will do though is show you the other damaged parts that make up the armor. You've got the area around the arc reactor with a big slash happening through it caused by Whiplash's whips. And you've also got a couple of these little side parts. Basically these armor pieces here, they give you swappable options happening there as well, where you get a much more exposed undercarriage or under area of the armor now visible. To go ahead and replace those, it's simply just a case of popping these off, which come out rather easily. And pop out the other one here. I say rather easy, and now all of a sudden this one's going to give me problems. We'll go ahead and take the arc reactor off in the meantime. Actually, you know what? There we go. And we'll just pop that off as well. Now, before we put everything back in place, you can now get a better idea of the inner workings of the armor. Don't get too attached to it though, because we're going to go ahead and replace these. So that goes on the one side. Actually, you know what? It goes up here. The hardest thing is just figuring out the angles. The other one will pop into place like so. And then we'll take the arc reactor damaged plate, and that will plug into place like so. Now, these don't actually have flaps. They don't have the moving flaps like the ones we just looked at. Instead, the trade-off, though, is some heavy damage happening here. Again, all you see, these little gears and mechanics underneath here. Like I said, a big slash happening around the top area of the arc reactor. It's really a great look. In fact, the look is so good, I kind of kicked myself that I never got the chance to get the 6-scale release of Whiplash. I might try to go back and pick him up. I granted understand that he is a slightly older figure, but I think his sculpt still holds up well enough that I would definitely want to pick him up and have him displayed side by side against Iron Man here. The Mark V's other accessories will include, of course, he's got to come with a ton of interchangeable hands. He comes with a total of 6 hands. I've currently got closed fists as the default option for the way I've got him displayed right now, but Tony Stark also comes included with the tried and true articulated finger hands. Still is visible the repulsor blasts if you want to activate them and have them projecting through here, but these fingers do give you some options to, in some ways, technically give you a closed fist if you wanted to go that route. You could also do thumbs up if you wanted to, but there's some options available there. And as well as if anyone's collected these Iron Man figures in the past, you know this will be also an included hand. It's the slightly tipped up hand, exposing again the repulsor blast through the front here. And to accomplish that, go ahead. I've already taken the panel off and turned it back on. Just going to pull the fist off and find the appropriate hand. There's the light right there. Pop that back into place. And now you've got the angled hand. You can go ahead and do the same on the other side. Grab the forearm, pop that off, and replace it once again with the angled hand. Again, it gives you some options for how you want to display the figure. Sometimes I may very well leave the batteries in. I know I don't do it too often, but if I'm having friends over or something, I want to just show off this. And then I'll go through the liberty of just kind of taking off the panels and turning on everything to show you how it works. And actually, you know what, while we're at that, we'll go ahead and pop off everything off in the meantime. We'll slide off the panel here, turn that on, just so you guys can see all the lights working together. Slide that back into place, pop that on. Yes, I acknowledged, I saw the fact that that flap came off. That flap comes off very frequently. Go ahead and take this off, which is the hardest of the three things to do. Turn that on, place that, and we'll go ahead and replace the side armor plate. And there you have Iron Man, the Mark V, with all the lights going. The last of the included accessories is Whiplash's arc reactor, or makeshift reactor that he uses during the fight against the Mark V. Pretty cool that they would include this, although there is no real damage to be said for the reactor frame here. It's nice that, again, that they would have included it. Let's run through Iron Man's articulation. His head is on a ball joint, and his neck is also on a ball joint. So you get two joints in which you can move the head from. Just to also show you with Tony Stark's head, there is two ball joints happening there as well. You might want to also be aware of where Adam's apple is, that you don't ultimately rotate it around and have it disappear on you. But at the very least, that's a small price to pay for the fact that you get a hinge not once, but twice on these figures. The shoulders, as we've already discussed, have two hinges. There's a hinge on the bottom and a hinge on the top. And that hinge on the top also gives you a ball joint, so you can rotate the shoulders all the way around. The arms rotate forward and back and out. He has a swivel at the top cut of where the shoulder attaches. A hinge, double hinge to be exact, on the arms, as well as a rotation all the way around on the hands. You can also go ahead and pull these. They do retract out ever so slightly, allowing you to also get some extra mileage where you can get the arms to rotate all the way around. You can also default it by pushing these in, like so. The torso is rather neat because it's got an accordion feature to it, kind of like the coils of a snake. You can rotate the torso at right that cut there, allowing the top torso to rotate back and forth, and a slight pivot back and forth. What you can also do too is pull and detach in 2 points. There's one there, and there is one up here. And then it gives you an additional range of motion, so you can move that forward, back and forth. Again, there's that plate popping off on me again. For the leg articulation, the legs only split to about there. You'll start seeing that a lot of things start butting up against one another, giving you really only a split like this. However, you can also bring the legs forward, or bring the legs down, I should say, and there goes that plate once again. Don't worry, I'll talk about that in final looks. But the legs do pull out as well, giving you extra range of motion there as well. Double hinge on the knee. And then when it comes down to the feet have a forward back motion. You can also rock the ankle back and forth. And there's also toe articulation. There's a little hinge on the front end of it here. You may also see too that as I'm moving the foot, that you have these individual flaps on the sides of the armor. You can move those out so that when you are moving the feet, they're not in the way at all. Okay, so let's discuss the pros and the cons of the Hot Toys Iron Man 2 Mark V Iron Man. Pros are it's an exquisitely detailed and well-painted figure. It's got all the little scratches and notations in it to show that the armor has been used. It has the interchangeable damaged parts too, so if you want to have it look as if it's near the end of its fight with the first encounter of Whiplash, you can mix out the arms and the different armor components, and you can make it look more heavily damaged. Light up options is always a plus for me. And this has light up options both in the hands, the arc reactor, and the head. I like the interchangeable head options where we get ourselves a Tony Stark. And overall, I just think the figure comes together rather well. Negatives, however, and there are a few. I wish the display base could have been a little bit bigger. Judging by the nature of the way that you're displaying a figure, and as you can probably see right now with the Mark V here, I've got the legs relatively a wide stance. It means that they're just on the edge of this rectangular display base that I think they could have allotted at least a ½ inch longer both width and depth on this, so at least you got a larger display base for a heavier figure like Iron Man here. The crotch clip, though, does help. It barely grazes the undercarriage of Iron Man's suit, that there's not very much holding on to the armor. The crotch clip, I think, could have been a little bit longer to fit fully around the lower torso of Iron Man, or they could have come up with a different way to display him other than using that clip. That crotch clip just doesn't hold him as well as they should. The suitcase is also a nice touch. Kind of wish that the suitcase could have opened a little bit and had some moving components, but I guess my biggest concern with the figure, and if anything be a deal breaker, not that this would be a deal breaker because I still love this suit, I really wish that the Tony Stark head could have been more accurate to the scene in which that sculpt is taken from. Even at the point that he's about to flip down his visor, Tony Stark's head has bangs. He kind of is a more roughed up looking Tony. And unfortunately, the head sculpt that they provided doesn't really look like the scene in which this fight is supposed to take place from. I don't know if they've reused this head sculpt from another Tony, but it makes no sense why they would have used this particular head sculpt when clearly fans who have watched the movie know exactly what Tony Stark is supposed to look like. So really my only nitpicks would be the suitcase, and that's small, the head sculpt, which is generally small, and the display stand, which I really think could have been worked on better, so at least you could get a wider stance from Iron Man and not run the risk that he's going to topple over. This being a heavier figure, stability and a good proper display base could really go a long way. If you guys are interested in picking up the Iron Man Mark V for yourself, it's currently available over at Sideshow Collectibles on a wait list. In other words, it's not available right now, but the moment that it is available, if you're already on the wait list, you'll have one reserved for you. The price point is going to be $345, which may seem high, but keep in mind for all the stuff that you get with this figure and for the fact that it is metal, of course the price point on these are going to be a little bit higher than conventional 6-scale figures. You can also, with Sideshow Collectibles, pay in installment plans, which is one of the few sites that allow you that option. If $350 seems like a lot, you can break that down into smaller installments, like I'm doing with a whole bunch of figures. I've actually got, just counting in my head right now, I've got about 5 figures currently in installment plans, and kind of each month I'm paying like 1 or 2 of them at a go. It means that you don't have to pay a whole lump sum up front, and along the way, $50 to $100 for each installment, you're paying off multiple figures in one go, so eventually when they're all paid off, they're going to be delivered right to your door. And you can do that over at SideshowCollectibles.com. Today we were having a look at the Hot Toys. This was the Iron Man Mark II, or Iron Man 2 Mark V, or the suitcase armor, if you will. Today we were having a look at the 6-scale die-cast movie masterpiece series. Got tongue-tied there at the end. If you guys haven't had a chance to hit that little subscribe button down below, make sure you do so. We're going to have a look at some more Hot Toy figure reviews coming up, and of course some other stuff coming your way as well. One thing you can also do too to help support this channel is head over to my main channel when you're finished this video and kind of scroll down the section that says videos. See if there's any videos that you may have missed along the way, and if there is, make sure you check that out and leave a comment in those videos. As always guys, thanks for watching as you always do. I'll see you next time.